of September, the second Thursday of the month, and after a summer off, it is the return of Healthy Minds, Better Lives. It's me, Tom, from The Breakfast Show with Folly Farm, here again, reunited with Tammy and Hayley. Good evening to you both.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. I've missed you.
I've missed you all.
It's so great to have you back on the show here this evening, and you'll notice another face on the screen with us here this evening as well. More on that in just a second, but first we've got a jam-packed show for you to welcome us into what I'm calling the new year, deliberately so, because Hayley, this is the time of year where routines kind of come back.
Yes, it's that weird time of year, isn't it? Because it is the new start of the school term, college terms, universities are going back, and all things settle back into normality again.
They do. So what does that mean to you? We want to know about any difficulties you have with routine, maintaining routines, changing routines, going back to routine, and whether or not it is a bit of a struggle. What about a bit of a spice of spontaneity in there as well? We'd love to hear your thoughts. We're covering that later on. We're also going to hear from Brian from Prostate Cymru, Pembrokeshire Friends of the charity, after I caught up with him and CCF last week about the work that they've been doing and what they're funding. And we're going to be joined by Helen Ensom Morgan from the afternoon show, although she was on drive time today, talking about World Suicide Prevention Day, which took place on Tuesday. And Tammy, the changing the narrative was the theme of this year, which I think is a bit overdue, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We do like that. Going the pro narrative. I do like flipping things around. So I really welcome this year's theme.
Yeah, so Helen's going to be joining us in around about 15-20 minutes or so, because I've already mentioned that we've got someone with us. Delighted to have Gemma Taylor with us. Good evening.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for spending your evening with Healthy Minds, Better Lives.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Pure West Radio. And I'm going to make it of it. You're not here alone today. We've got James with us as well from Silver's CIC. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. And together you are looking at how we can, or how you can help destigmify mental health conditions, and one in particular that you've been diagnosed with. So very quickly, a headline: what is it that you suffer with? And we're going to find out more about you in the case of finding out how that impacts you.
I was diagnosed 16 years ago with schizophrenia.
16 years ago?
16 years ago, yeah, when I was 26.
26. Hayley, first you, in your practice and mental health, what dealings have you had with schizophrenia?
Not as much as I have had in my training. So we did training with Time to Change Wales when I did my initial training with them, and I met some colleagues there. But client-wise, I haven't worked with many with schizophrenia. But it's something I really want to get more experience in, because I think my program, I think would help. But it's not somewhere that people send people, because it's very specialized in terms of who can, or at least to the medical profession, say can support people with schizophrenia.
Yeah. And then the same question to you, Tammy.
I'm similar to Hayley. I haven't actually worked with or supported clients with schizophrenia. So I'm really keen to actually to listen to your story, Gemma, and just to kind of like just share what's happened to you as well.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, and then my experience, as regular watchers and listeners of this show will know, is that my kind of mental health experience is in cancer services. So Gemma, the floor is yours. But before we jump straight into the diagnosis, you mentioned just then you were how old when you were diagnosed?
26, and I'm 42 now.
And you're 42 now, which means that schizophrenia hasn't even been part of your life for half of it yet, like far from it.
Well, you say that's not strictly true in some ways, because the onset of it started in childhood, not so much what came known as the diagnosis, but the difficult experiences from childhood what eventually manifested as schizophrenia later on then. So
yeah. So give us a flavour as to who Gemma is. What one thing that I know you're going to touch upon later on is a trigger.
yeah.
And I want to make listeners aware that there are triggers. We're talking about schizophrenia. We're talking about suicide prevention in this show as well. So just be aware of that. Some of the themes may cause some distress, but we will have, well, we've got numbers available on our website should you be impacted. There was one particular trigger. We're going to come back to that. But what were you like growing up? Who was Gemma growing up?
My childhood was highly dysfunctional. So there were 3 incidences of child sexual abuse trauma. The first one I was 5. The family unit was dysfunctional too. My teenage years were also dysfunctional. I drank heavy, made a lot of mistakes, stuff like that. It all just rolled into one because nothing was ever dealt with. I mean, you're going back to, I was born in 1981, so, and nobody knew then. They didn't understand trauma. I mean, the understanding of trauma has come on in leaps and bounds in the last 15, 20 years. They now know that we carry it somatically and subconsciously and that it doesn't just go away. So my voice is a bit crackly because I'm nervous, but yeah.
You're fine. No, one thing that I love about this show, and Tammy and Hayley will agree with me, is that we've got all the time. So that, but I'm very aware that the themes that you're talking about, this isn't something that we talk about. Oh yes, schizophrenia. The definition of schizophrenia is the doctors have described it as a such and such and such.
Yeah.
This is your lived experience.
Yes, it is.
And we're very mindful of that. And we're grateful for you for sharing it. And what's the reason for sharing it in the first place?
Because I've made a book of art and poetry called 50 Shades of Insight, The Inner Workings of Schizophrenia. And I made it during lockdown, during COVID, and it took 16 months. But I wanted to create the book. The reasons were threefold. One was for myself as a catharsis. The second reason was because what people don't realize about schizophrenia is it's a highly debilitating condition. It's classed as a severe mental impairment. And I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless and to help people who maybe are just starting to experience negative mental health experiences and to give them the benefit of what I've learned through my own insight and experience over the years. And I also wanted to bridge the gap between the people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia and those who know nothing about it. So yeah, and to just it could happen potentially to anyone. It's to do with difficult life experiences. That's why it manifests in certain individuals. So things like unresolved childhood trauma, dysfunction, and just things that aren't dealt with at the time later can manifest psychologically and emotionally. So anything that's trapped in your system that's been suppressed and hasn't been processed can then create chaos basically in your inner world. So
yeah. And how has it manifested with you? Because I imagine there's a myriad of symptoms, but not everyone gets everyone. Is that fair?
Yeah. I've suffered for the last 22 years with chronic intrusive thoughts, but in my teens, the cracks were beginning to show. I mean, you're talking about Suicide Prevention Week. When I was 13, I attempted suicide for the first time. I was cutting myself. I was in a mess all throughout my teenage years. I drank very heavily, which compounded things. By the time, so I was having bizarre ruminating thoughts that were creeping into my psychology that I couldn't dismiss. By the time I was 20, the intrusive thoughts changed and took on a more severe form. So I've lived with them chronically every day for 22 years, as well as a terrifying fear that everyone can see and hear them. Also, I've tried everything. I mean, I've done affirmations. I've tried so many different avenues. I've been having homeopathy for the last 5 years, but to truly break through it and to reprogram all that damage and to release all that damage may yet prove to not be something that I managed to do completely. But I've certainly got to the stage where it's more manageable than it's been historically.
Yeah. When did you become aware of it, that the thoughts that you were having weren't necessarily normal? Because it's a young age that they develop. You might just think, this is what it means to be human.
No, I knew it was strange, but I couldn't. I didn't really talk about it for years. It was like I was having these strange ruminations, and because of my history hadn't been dealt with, my childhood, I just sort of did the best I could with it and never disclosed it until they changed and took on a more severe form at the age of 20. I kept it quiet for about a year. And then I began to say, I think I remember saying to a family member, look, I'm having these thoughts and they're really disturbing. And because you're talking about the content is very socially taboo content. So any kind of societal taboo, it's almost like an anti-society mechanism in your own head. It's like thinking everything you'd never not want to think because it scares you. So you think, and they get stuck and they ruminate and they ruminate and they ruminate. I also went on to be a voice hearer as well after that for a few years. So yeah, so it went from me recognizing the thoughts as my own to then not recognizing the thoughts as my own later on, and to hearing voices. So I've had stuff with demonic voices, with angelic voices, all sorts of stuff. And by the time I was diagnosed, I remember that all of my thoughts were in the third person, and they weren't just auditory, they were visual as well. And they come at you left, right, and center 24/7.
Yeah.
So
So they're there.
yeah,
Wow.
completely. And it's like, because the body was traumatized, I got locked in my head due to trauma. And for that reason, I may as well have not had a body. I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't embodied at all. It was just constant chaos. And I knew nothing then of what I have fought over the years to discover as to where this all came from and why I had the breakdown I had, to make sense of it all over the years. And I've largely done it on my own. So for my own survival, I had very little other choice. So
yeah. And you mentioned about the chaotic upbringing and the attempt at suicide and the self-harm. Was that a byproduct of the intrusive thoughts, or was it something that
not that early? No. The intrusive thoughts gradually began to show a bit later in my teens. But no, it was due to, I remember when I was about 12, 13. Well, I was 11 when I started physically shaking. I remember that. So my nervous system was clearly overrun with trauma at that point when I was 11 years old. That's why I'm a bit shaky now as well. So, but yeah, the suicide attempt came about because I thought I was worthless. I had no self-worth at all. And I remember the train of thought at the time thinking people would be better off without me actually being around. So yeah.
Yeah. Hayley, you've been listening in on this first section here. What thoughts and questions do you have?
It's lovely to hear somebody explaining their own experience, because we hear a lot about the medical version of schizophrenia and how the doctors talk about it and how they treat it. But the lived experience is always different. So to hear your open and honest reflection on that, and to hear that you've done a lot of the work yourself, it's amazing, because I think we have a lack of cohesion when it comes to support for mental health. We have so many different models of support, and yet there are people still slipping through the net because we can't seem to make our support individualized. And that's the most disappointing thing, is that to get to where you are is amazing, specifically on your own, but there should be support for people who are struggling.
It's not totally on my own, don't get me wrong, but I've done a lot of inner work. I have had therapies via both ones I've paid for myself and ones that I've had under services. I mentioned the homeopathy as well. I'm having that done alongside it, stuff like that. But a lot of journaling work I've done over the years, particularly since I started the homeopathy 5 years ago. I've probably written about 5 or 6 journals of going really raw and really deep into the contents of my own psyche. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey. They call it a healing journey for a reason, but it's not about the end result. It's about what you learn along the way, I suppose. But yeah.
Interesting that the journaling can be so powerful as well.
Yeah.
Tammy, you've also been listening in.
Yes, and again, I kind of echo what Hayley said in terms of actually sharing your story. You are a survivor. You are surviving, and I think it's important that you take that recognition for it.
Yeah.
My question is, well, firstly, I watched yours and James's schizophrenia mental health awareness video.
Oh, okay, on YouTube.
On YouTube, yes,
Oh,
yeah.
brilliant, yeah.
And it's a wonderful piece of work that you've both done, especially where you read the poem "You can heal symptoms, you can't heal labels."
Yeah.
And you read it amazingly, and I was enthralled just listening and watching. But after reflecting on it, can I just ask, what was the original catalyst that set you on your journey to write this book with your poems, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. I mentioned earlier that there were 3 incidents of childhood sexual abuse trauma, and the first one was by a neighbour when I was 5 years old, and I wrote a poem on it, which is included in the book. And it was unfortunately witnessed by my brother, who was only 2 years older when he came in. He witnessed it happening then. And so it wasn't only a case of I'd been sexually violated and the impact that had on my body and my mind, but there was the element of, oh, this has just been seen by my older brother who couldn't protect me. He was 2 years older than me. Then there were unfortunate circumstances surrounding it, like the neighbours were divided because everyone found out about what happened. So they were arguing in the street outside the front of my house. Unfortunately, as well, not long afterwards, a little girl came up to me in school who had obviously overheard something and didn't quite compute it herself. And I was still in a traumatized state. And she said to me, even the kids in Ethiopia knew about what happened to me. So there's the roots, the original roots for my fear of telepathy and why I was terrified. If I have a thought that I'm chronically ashamed of, I think everyone can see and hear it. So yeah. And also the impact of childhood sexual abuse, it inflicts chronic shame on you and misplaced guilt. And the definition of guilt is when you feel you've done something wrong, and the definition of shame is when you feel there's something wrong with you. And living with those all throughout my life, and the cracks just began to show more and more as I got older then. But yeah, it's been a heck of a journey so far.
Because it's one thing having a terrible thing happen to you, it's another thing to have that witnessed immediately by someone in your nuclear family immediately. And then to have it spread like wildfire so quickly, you can't even process it before everyone else has already decided.
And it was 1987, I think it was, or 1986. And so nobody dealt with childhood sexual abuse trauma back then. Nobody knew how. So it wasn't even really, there was no attempt to deal with it. So it festered inside me. It lived inside me for a long time. And because of the other incidents that followed that, and because of all the dysfunction in my childhood within the family unit as well, because there was quite a bit of that too, I never got a chance to process anything. So it was difficult, to say the least. So yeah.
And then when you started becoming aware then of these thoughts and that you could see them and you're thinking, well, everybody must know this as fact. Where did the journey begin of trying to make sense of that? And when did the poetry and the images start coming with that?
I was always into my art. Even in primary school, I used to love doing artwork. So I've always had the artistic creative streak in me. The poetry came a bit later. I started writing poetry in my early 20s originally, but I didn't keep any of them. I think I threw them all away, aside from 2 that I memorized, because I've got a very good memory as well. So I memorized 2 of them, and I included 2 of those 2 poems I memorized in the book because they were applicable in retrospect. So they fitted within the book. But yeah, I love expressing myself creatively through art and through words. So it's something that's always been in me, I guess.
Yeah. This is going to come across as a very perverse question, but have the intrusive thoughts and those external thoughts that only you see, how much have they influenced actual content that you're writing?
A lot, yeah. There's a very dark poem in there, and it's a projected image of hell, and it's very graphic, and it is centered around, firstly, experiences I had where I thought that demons had my soul, and I thought I was being dragged into hell. And I verbalized the words, I accept God's will to burn 1,000 times over in hell. I didn't know where it came from. It was just something that sprang into my mind. And but energetically, it's like it's a sensory experience as well as psychological and emotional. So you tend to feel things that other people aren't experiencing and stuff like that. It's absolutely terrifying, or has been at times over the years. But yeah, so I wrote that poem, and it's very graphic, and it's a projected image of my idea of what hell would be like, basically. So
based on
some of the intrusive thoughts, and based on societal stuff as well too. So
because how regularly do you get the thoughts, or did you get the thoughts, or both?
Well, now I get them every day, different thoughts, residual ones. I've dealt with it, processed quite a lot of them, but there's still some that are residual. So they'll come in every so often. And eye contact naturally is a trigger for me. So I've had to learn to hold eye contact over the years. But because my brother witnessed what was happening with that original incident, eye contact's always been a trigger. So, but for about 15 years, they were 24/7. The only break I would get was when I was asleep. So.
And then just to bring us back to why you're here and why you're talking about it, if you're happy, we'd love to hear one of the poems that you have from the book. And of course, we've got the camera on, so those that are watching us on social media at the moment, they can even look at the image that accompanies it, because every poem's got an image with it. But what's the aim that you've got for the everyday person in the street, or maybe someone else that's going through the symptoms and diagnosis, or they're in treatment at the moment? But what's your message to them before we hear this poem?
What's my message? I just want to raise as much awareness as I can and talk about something that's never talked about, because most people don't feel able to, who go through it, because of the chronic shame, because of the fear, because of the paranoia that can be a facet of it as well. A lot of people that go through this diagnosis, which I prefer personally to call a label for reasons I won't go into here, but yeah, I want to be a voice for very often the voiceless, for those that don't feel able. I mean, there was a time when I had no identity, and I certainly didn't feel like I had a voice. So it was, as I've pieced myself back together over the years, it's now to help others and to show people that there are facets, that we're all part of the human condition, and what runs through one has the potential to run through another. And if someone's life circumstances were different, those facets would have been brought out in them as well. So to show that we're not all that different, the difference is that we're more traumatized for whatever reason, So it's not a weakness. In fact, to live through what people like myself live through every day isn't a weakness at all. So not to get through it and still be sat here and to survive each day. So yeah.
And to create through it as well.
To create through it, yeah.
I'm going to bring Hayley back in for any thoughts before we ask you to read something. Hayley.
No, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's so important. We don't do enough sharing, but the power of sharing from a lived experience is for the community, for everybody, is absolutely amazing. I think we used to do it, and we used to sit down with communities and sit and share, but I don't think we've got the same types of community. So having this experience with you tonight has been really enlightening for me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tammy.
Well, just to actually just break the taboo. Just that, just even the word schizophrenia, just mental health, it can make people just want to maybe just turn away or just try and ignore. So I love that phrase, you are the voice of the voiceless. That's so powerful, so powerful. Thank you for coming on and breaking the taboo, starting the conversations.
Thank you.
Lovely. You've got your book with you.
I have.
Let's have a look.
Okay. Shall I hold up the picture as well?
I was going to say, so hold the book up. So there's your camera there. So what does the front cover look like?
Oh, the front cover. So we've got, it says not for resale because it's self-published on Amazon. So this is my own proof. So yeah, so that's the front. And that's taken from the poem, The Phoenix I Rise Again.
And for those that are listening, describe that front cover.
Oh, okay. The front cover. So it's basically got a very colourful image of a phoenix rising from the flames.
Nice. And then inside the image that accompanies the poem, do you encourage to see the image first and then read, or do you read and then look at the image?
Depends on the individual, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll give the individuals an opportunity to see this image, and for those that are listening and not watching, just give it a bit of an audio description for us.
Okay, so there's a photograph of me and my brother around the age of when the incident occurred in the centre of the picture, and it's called Gemma because my name's Gemma, and I fused it with my brother's name, which is Mark, and I did that as a kind of like confused identity thing, and because of what happened that day. And then in brackets it's called She's Away with the Fairies, because I was playing with dandelion clocks in the garden just before the incident happened, before I called round there, And it was like going from being an innocent 5-year-old child, because I was calling them fairies, the dandelion clocks, to 10 minutes later, having my innocence blown apart and being hypersexualized and entered into a world that was, what just happened? It was like, whoa. So really, really overwhelming and disturbing. So, yeah.
Yeah. As far as like siblings are concerned, it's great to have a strong bond with your sibling, but the bond was fused with not something you wanted to be bonding over at all.
No. And it had an impact on my brother as well, but obviously I'm not going to go into that here.
Of course,
but
yeah. So let Gemma, as read by Gemma Taylor.
I remember the day of innocence lost. I played with the fairies, the dandelion clocks. For my friend I did call, but she was not there. Instead stood her father, who drew me into his lair. For the trap he had laid, an act of perversion, would impact me for years through its violation. He sat me on his lap, and pulled down my clothes, stimulated my clitoris, and in that moment I froze. My body did respond intensely as it happens, yet the terror and revulsion tore me till I shattered. The trauma went so deep that my soul it had to split, so I've spent years searching for that fragmented little kid. Then in walked my brother, for the door had been left open. He witnessed what was happening and stood there also frozen. Then the pervert stopped his act as I jumped up from his lap, ashamed, in pain, reviled. My soul it had been zapped. Years of consequences they did then ensue. Confused attachment, misplaced guilt, and a chronic sense of shame. Weakened boundaries, fear of men, and of being seen. Loathing for myself, hypervigilantly aware, and triggered due to eye contact from my brother's stare. All of this did cause my pleasure to shut down, and I demonized my genitals and womanhood as well, to the point where Satan hounded me to drag me into hell. And trying to release the energy congealed within my soul is proving very difficult as I attempt to become whole. So I seek to free myself from the demons of the past and transmute my asthmatic energy through forgiveness of the act.
Thank you very much.
When I mention forgiveness of the act, it's only as a form of self-liberation, not as a form of condoning what happened.
Well, I'm sure that Hayley and Tammy would have thoughts that the forgiveness on yourself is actually a really important stage in moving on as well, because we can hold on to things very tightly, but then that's a lot of energy and a lot of effort to go through that. Hayley.
I would agree with the forgiveness. It's never about them, really. It's always about us making sure that we let go of the impact. I work a lot with emotional impact, and we don't talk about it. We don't look at things we talk about situations that we've been through, but we need to talk more about the emotional impact on people and how that happens. And that forgiveness piece is all part of that, releasing the emotional impact of what's happened to us and allowing that pain to free itself.
Yeah. Tammy.
I'm just I'm quite speechless, if I'm honest. That's a very powerful emotional poem, Gemma, and it is that journey of self-healing, and I generally am quite speechless. I really am.
Gemma, it's been fantastic hearing you and to actually see you, and for more than what a lot of other people see and what they envisage when they hear the term schizophrenia and all the terminology that goes along with it. And I hope that through your poetry and through your imagery and your own creative outlet, and also raising awareness, talking about it, that there might be that one other person out there that's 1% more able to forgive themselves for having these thoughts, and that they're able to try and do something more than they think they're capable of, is something that is remarkable. And I hope that that gives you even more satisfaction. And I imagine that along with the bad thoughts you've had, are there, I know that because it's trauma related, so I'm trying to tread lightly, but are there also elements of actually real uplift through having the condition?
Yeah, I've been through euphoric stages with it, but they weren't grounded stages. But yes, I mean, it's like you venture into other worlds. It's like an altered state of consciousness when it's at its fullest impact. So, for instance, what I said earlier about like when I was hunted down by demonic presences and stuff. But I've also had experiences with angelic presence. I feel energy. I'm quite energetically sensitive, and I believe in spiritual dimensions and stuff like that. I believe that the spirit realm is real. So for me, yeah, there are times where I felt like I've been very close. In fact, I've probably been more comfortable throughout my life in other dimensions than I have in the mundane everyday reality. So yeah, I journey off into other places all the time. So yeah.
Use it for a bit of individual gain there.
Yeah.
And what a great way to flip the narrative on its head and to use that. So you've got this book now, which you hope will help other people find about themselves a little bit more through different trauma responses. Any other creative outlets coming forward? And if people want to find out more about you, maybe they've got their own platform and they think, oh, I want Gemma to come and talk about me for overcoming adversity, overcoming trauma. What's the best? Is that a desire that you have? Is that something that you want to share more of?
I'd like to go on to become like a spokesperson, I suppose, and raise awareness in as many different places and avenues as I can. So, and maybe with James's help, we can make that happen. So yeah, it's but I carry on with my art and poetry as well and keep my hand in there. So yeah, I love doing my art and poetry. So I want to self-publish another book on Amazon as well of just assorted poems that I've done. So I'm going to do that soon as well.
So watch this space. Where can people find the book and find out more about you?
On Amazon. So yeah, where can they find out more about me? I suppose. Well, I've got the video on YouTube. So yeah, the short, and me and James are hoping to make subsequent videos. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's with James from Silber's CIC, Silber's Kick. And then just to bring you in, James, very quickly, if people want to find out more about Gemma and about Silber's, where can they go for that?
Sure, they can just email me basically at james@silbercic.org.uk and ask me any questions about Gemma. And we're also looking to raise some funds basically to do a 3 episodes on Gemma's life. So that's something that's being worked upon.
Yeah.
So if anybody can help out there with funding, please contact me.
There you go. If you can support Gemma in any way, then please do get in touch. And let's just have a quick little have a look. Hayley.
I keep having to press mute off. No, thank you for tonight. Thank you for just sharing and wanting to be that voice, because I think that there are so many people living in shame because of the way that things like schizophrenia are portrayed on the media. You know, there's this awful portrayal of it. And I remember as a child what I grew up believing schizophrenia was, and how that's been changed, having met some people. Like, you know, there's lots of people on Times Change Wales who share their story, and having listened to their story and your story. And we need more of that. We need more reality around people's lived experience. So I think it's brilliant. And I watched a little bit of your YouTube. I think one of the kids called me halfway through. So I'll get back to looking at that as well, and hopefully pick up your book at some point as well.
Oh, thank you.
And Tammy.
I just couldn't unmute myself then either, so I do apologise. It's been wonderful to meet you, Gemma. You know, to raise awareness of schizophrenia, to be just so open of your journey, of your lived experiences, as we've said, and I really wish you all the best with carrying on with these conversations, because it benefits so many people, and you really are a survivor.
Thank you.
Gemma, thank you so much. Wishing you all the best. And when you do have that other book of poetry, please do get in touch. Let us know.
Will do.
And is there any other parting words that you would like as you're here live on Pure West Radio?
Just that I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing, and to say thank you to you all as well. So yeah, thank you.
You are very welcome. Looking forward to seeing the impact that you have on other people around you and, well, beyond with the YouTube videos and whatnot. Gemma Taylor, 50 Shades of Insight. It's available on Amazon, and you can find more information going to Silber's CIC if you think that there's an avenue where Gemma can support you and your network of friends or colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, it is coming up to 9:45, and we're going to be with Helen Enser Morgan from the afternoon show and Drive Time. She's going to be bringing us back 2 days to World Suicide Prevention Day. Changing the narrative is the theme. We'll be back after Sunny Federa, Jazzy, DOD, and Some Days playing for you here on Purist Radio.